On the basis of available evidence and these expert assessments of the evidence, the scientific criteria for an influenza pandemic have been met. I have therefore decided to raise the level of influenza pandemic alert from phase 5 to phase 6. The world is now at the start of the 2009 influenza pandemic.
In June 2009, the CEO of the World Health Organization at that time, Margaret Chan, declared the 2009 swine flu pandemic. The swine flu was caused by the H1N1 influenza virus, and the symptoms were similar to those of other influenzas, such as fever, dry cough, headache, joint pain, sore throat, chills, fatigue, and runny nose. Diarrhea, vomiting, and neurological problems were reported in some cases. Various governments worldwide reacted to this announcement, with some countries advising their citizens to postpone non-essential travel to the United States or Mexico, where it originated. By the 19th of November 2009, millions of vaccine doses had been administered in over 16 countries. In addition, many countries, notably the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, have committed to vast sums of money to pre-order vaccines from pharmaceutical companies. France, for example, spent over €600 million on 94 million doses of vaccine, most of which were never used. In January 2010, Dr. Wolfgang Wodarg, a physician and the chairman of the Health Committee at the Council of Europe, claimed that major firms had organized a campaign of panic to put pressure on the World Health Organization to declare a false pandemic to sell vaccines. Dr. Wolfgang Wodarg said the WHO false pandemic flu campaign is one of the greatest medicine scandals of the century. He said that the false pandemic campaign began in May 2009 in Mexico City, when 100 normal reported influenza cases were declared to be the beginning of a threatening new pandemic, when there was very little scientific evidence for it. Wolfgang Wodarg argued that the WHO, in cooperation with some big pharmaceutical companies and their scientists, redefined pandemics, removing the statement that an enormous amount of people have contracted the illness or died, from its existing definition, and replacing it by stating simply that there has to be a virus, spreading beyond borders and to which people have no immunity.
Deadly influenza pandemic or nothing worse than a mild case of the flu. Here in Thailand, their swine flu vaccination program has just begun. But in other parts of the world, serious questions are being raised about the handling of the pandemic. Health officials around the world had believed swine flu could kill hundreds of thousands, if not millions. They introduced emergency measures and spent in excess of $20 billion on vaccines. But now Wolfgang Wodarg, head of health at the Council of Europe, says they got it wrong. Not only that, they were misled by the World Health Organization and unduly influenced by drug companies.
The WHO, in cooperation with some big pharmaceutical companies and their scientists, redefined pandemics and lowered the alarm threshold. Those new standards forced politicians in most states to react immediately and sign marketing commitments for additional and new vaccines against swine flu and spend billions of dollars to catch up.
Also in 2010, the European Parliament launched an inquiry to look into the issue of falsified pandemic that was declared by WHO in June 2009, on the advice of its group of academic experts, SAGE, many of whose members have been documented to have intense financial ties to the same pharmaceutical giants such as GlaxoSmithKline, Roche, Novartis, who benefit from the production of drugs and untested H1N1 vaccines. They will also investigate the influence of the pharma industry in creation of a worldwide campaign against the so-called avian flu and swine flu. In June 2010, Fiona Godley, editor-in-chief of the BMJ, published an editorial which criticized the WHO, saying that an investigation had disclosed that some of the experts advising WHO on the pandemic had financial ties with drug companies which were producing antivirals and vaccines. Fiona Godley told Al Jazeera that the investigation by the BMJ suggests that there was substantial influence at a number of key stages in the declaration of the pandemic, the definition of the pandemic, the triggering of vaccine contracts around the world, and advice to government to stockpile large numbers of expensive antiviral drugs. The extent of misjudgment was really very profound in this case. She said. Margaret Chan, Director General of the WHO, replied, stating, "Without question, the BMJ feature and editorial will leave many readers with the impression that WHO's decision to declare a pandemic was at least partially influenced by a desire to boost the profits of the pharmaceutical industry. The bottom line, however, is that decisions to raise the level of pandemic alert were based on clearly defined virological and epidemiological criteria. It is hard to bend these criteria, no matter what the motive." In 2010, Channel 4's Jon Snow reports on the Council of Europe's investigation into the manufactured swine flu hoax.
It is one of the greatest medical scandals of the century, according to a leading health expert in Brussels. The Council of Europe health chief has accused major pharmaceutical firms of organizing a campaign of panic and unduly influencing World Health Organization decisions. And with European countries now burdened with bills for millions of unwanted doses of the swine flu vaccine, he wants an investigation. Our science correspondent Tom Clark has this report.
Flu viruses can spread.
64,000 people dead, tens of thousands hospitalised, a country crippled by a virus. The predictions for the impact of swine flu on Britain were grim. The government's response, spending hundreds of millions of pounds on antiviral drugs and vaccines, adverts and leaflets. But 10 months into the pandemic, only 355 Britons have died, and globally, the virus hasn't lived up to our fears. Were governments misled into preparing for the worst? Politicians in Brussels are now asking for an investigation into the role pharmaceutical companies played in influencing political decisions that led to a swine flu spending spree.
There must be a process to get more transparency, how the decisions in the WHO, how they function, and who is influencing the decisions of the WHO, and what is the role of the pharmaceutical industry there. I'm very suspicious about the processes which are behind this pandemic.
The Council of Europe Committee want the investigation to focus on the World Health Organization's decision to lower the threshold required for a pandemic to be formally declared.
The world is now at the start of the 2009 influenza pandemic.
When this happened in June last year, governments had to activate huge pre-prepared contracts for drugs and vaccines with manufacturers. They also want to probe ties between key WHO advisors and drug companies.
Who is deciding what the risk is? Is it the pharmaceutical companies who want to sell drugs, or is it someone making a decision based on the perceived danger? In this case, it appears that the danger was vastly exaggerated. And was it exaggerated by the pharmaceutical companies in order to make money?
Our government, like many others, is now paying the price for being prepared. Citing commercial confidentiality, the Department of Health won't actually tell us how much swine flu vaccine they actually ordered. But it's thought contracts were signed for 90 million doses. Yet fewer than 4 million people in the UK have actually had the jab. Officials here are now in negotiation with their key supplier, GlaxoSmithKline, to see if they can't rewrite that very expensive contract. Britain is now trying to cancel orders for 60 million doses of the jab, but we're not the only country awash with vaccine. France ordered 94 million doses. It's now trying to cancel contracts for 50 million of those. Germany is trying to cancel orders for 25 million doses, and the Netherlands has announced it will sell 19 million of the 34 million vaccines it ordered. Last month, an investigation by Channel 4 News raised serious questions about the government's decision to order millions of doses of the drug Tamiflu and the possibility of pharmaceutical industry influence on decision-making. Today, the Department of Health defended its pandemic purchasing decisions, telling us in a statement they were based on independent scientific advice to ensure the country against the worst possible effects of a pandemic.
Please tell us the truth about coronavirus.
Please leave your comments below on what you think. Also, please like or dislike the video, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and be notified when we post new videos. Thank you.